I thought 17 years of marriage was proof against almost anything. I'd watched other couples fall apart and quietly reassured myself that we were built differently. More careful, more honest, more committed to the small daily work of staying close. I believed that, right up until the night of the Pinnacle Tech Gala, when I stood 20 feet from my wife on a crowded dance floor and watched her smile at another man the way she used to smile at me. She never once glanced in my direction. She didn't notice I'd left until I'd been driving for over an hour. And the first thing she sent when she finally texted was not "Where are you?" It was "I'm so sorry," which told me everything I needed to know about what she'd already understood. My name is Clayton Merrill. I'm 47 years old, and I design bridges for a living. Load-bearing systems, stress tolerances, the engineering of things meant to last under pressure. I've always liked that work for the same reason I liked my marriage. Both required patience, both rewarded careful attention, and both were built on the premise that the right foundation could hold almost anything. For 17 years, I believed I was right about that. My wife and I met at the University of Colorado during our junior year. She was studying communications. To communications. I was buried in physics and structural mechanics. We were drawn together at a mutual friend's birthday party in Boulder, talked until 2 in the morning, and never quite stopped. We dated through senior year, moved into a one-bedroom in Capitol Hill 6 months after graduation, and got married on a September weekend in Estes Park with the mountains behind us and 60 or so people who loved us in attendance. We never had children. We tried for a while in our early 30s, stopped trying, and eventually made peace with a life that was, in its own way, complete. We had Hudson, our golden retriever. We had a house in Washington Park that we'd been slowly renovating for 8 years. Always some project half done in a good-natured, lived-in way, still one bathroom short of finished. We had Thursday evening hikes and Sunday farmers market and an annual fall trip somewhere new. Portugal, New Zealand, the Outer Banks, a life that hummed steadily along and that I, perhaps naively, assumed would always be there when I reached for it. My wife had built a real career in corporate communications at a tech firm headquartered in Loudoun. She was good at it in the way that naturally sociable people are, sharp, quick to read a room, capable of making strangers feel immediately at ease. I was the opposite. More comfortable with calculations than cocktail parties, better at listening than small talk. For years, we joked that she was the reason we got invited to things, and I was the reason we didn't embarrass ourselves once we arrived. My father told me once, "Clayton, a good marriage doesn't roar. It hums." I wrote that down somewhere. I believed it deeply. I'm telling you all of this because I want you to understand what I thought I had before March 14th. I want you to feel the specific weight of 17 years. Thursday hikes, Sunday mornings, a half-renovated house, a dog named Hudson, a marriage that hummed. I want you to understand what I was standing in the middle of when the floor shifted. The Pinnacle Tech Industry Recognition Gala was held at the Grand Hyatt downtown, a ballroom event my wife's company had been sponsoring for the 3rd consecutive year. She'd spent 6 weeks in preparation mode. Late evenings at the kitchen table, with spreadsheets and vendor emails, early Saturday morning calls, the kind of focused anxiety that I recognized as her signal that something mattered professionally. I was proud of her. I took my one good suit jacket to the dry cleaner, bought a new dress shirt, and did my best to look like I belonged at this kind of event, which I've never fully managed and probably never will. She looked beautiful, a dark burgundy dress I hadn't seen before, hair done differently than usual, the small pearl earrings I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. "You clean up all right," she told me, adjusting my collar in the hotel lobby before we went in. The ballroom was precisely the kind of space designed to make everyone present feel briefly significant. 30-foot ceilings, a live string quartet. Near the entrance, round tables in white linen, floral arrangements that cost more per table than my monthly gym membership. My wife navigated it effortlessly, moving from cluster to corner, touching arms, laughing on cue, always slightly ahead of me, and always turning back to include me with a look or a word. For the first hour, it was fine. Better than fine, honestly. Watching her in her element reminded me of something I'd let go soft with familiarity. She was impressive. I felt the low-grade pride of a person watching someone they love be exactly who they are. The awards presentation wrapped up around 9:30. The quartet shifted into something fuller, and the open space near the stage became a dance floor. Couples drifted toward it the way couples do at these things. Obligatory at first, then less so as the drinks settled in. I was in a conversation I'd stumbled into with a project manager from a commercial construction firm, talking about steel supply chain problems in a way that was surprisingly real for a Thursday night in formal wear. When I looked up and found the dance floor with my eyes, my wife was already on it. She was dancing with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, early 40s, dark suit that fit him the way expensive suits do. An ease in his posture that comes from feeling consistently comfortable in rooms like this. His hand rested at the small of her back, low enough to be something, high enough to be deniable. But it wasn't his hand that made something tighten behind my sternum. It was her face. I know her face. I have been reading it for 17 years across tables and pillows, and kitchen counters and hiking trails. I know what she looks like when she's happy, and when she's performing happy, when she's genuinely engaged, and when she's being polite. What I was looking at from across that ballroom wasn't polite and wasn't performed. She was looking up at this man with an expression that was open in a way I hadn't seen in a long time, bright, leaned forward, full, like whatever he was saying was the most interesting thing in the room, and she was glad to be the person hearing it. I excused myself from the conversation and moved toward the bar. Kept them in my peripheral vision. Ordered a scotch I didn't touch. The song changed. A natural break. The kind where casual partners step apart and return to their respective tables. They didn't step apart. If anything, the space between them decreased slightly. A subtle renegotiation of proximity that felt less like two people forgetting to separate and more like two people choosing not to. A woman appeared at my left elbow. One of my wife's colleagues. Someone I recognized from 2 or 3 company events over the years. She glanced toward the dance floor, and something shifted in her expression. Just briefly. Just enough. "Oh," she said, tone carefully light. "I didn't know Ronan was going to be here tonight." Ronan. The name fell into the room like a key turning in a lock. Not a stranger. A name. A name that made this woman uncomfortable enough to drift away seconds later, suddenly needing to be somewhere across the room. I stood at that bar for 3 more minutes. I've turned those 3 minutes over in my mind 100 times since. What I was doing wasn't freezing. I was thinking with a clarity I hadn't asked for and couldn't stop. I didn't walk across the dance floor. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't hand Ronan the easy story of a jealous husband overreacting to an innocent dance while he stood there looking calm and reasonable. What I did was walk to the edge of the dance floor, calmly, deliberately. I positioned myself where she could see me if she turned. I waited. She turned. Our eyes met across about 15 feet of polished hardwood. 3 or 4 seconds, long enough for her to see the look on my face and understand exactly what it meant. Long enough for her to realize I hadn't missed any of it. I held her gaze, while I reached for my phone from the side table near the floor's edge, slipped it into my jacket pocket, and turned and walked toward the exit. Not quickly, not looking back. I needed her to know it was a choice, not a disappearance, a departure. The March air outside the hotel hit me cold and sharp in the way Denver air does in early spring when winter hasn't quite let go. I stood at the valet stand and waited for my car and tried to understand what was happening inside my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something colder than anger. Something closer to the quiet you get in the moment right after. Something falls and breaks, and before you've registered the full extent of it. I drove to Morris's place in Cap Hill. Morris has been my closest friend since sophomore year of college. We've watched more bad Broncos seasons than either of us should admit. Helped each other move twice, talked each other through the conversations that don't have clean answers. I called him on the way over. He picked up on the second ring. "I need to come over," I said. "Door's unlocked," he said. He had coffee made when I arrived, which is the specific thing Morris does when he senses it's serious. We sat at his kitchen table and I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, the way Morris listens, and when I finished, He sat quietly for a moment. She saw you, he said, when you held her eyes before you left. Yes. Good. He said it simply, and I understood what he meant. At least there was no ambiguity about what I knew. At least we'd been spared that particular additional cruelty. My phone had been buzzing since I'd left the hotel. I left it face down on Morris's table for a while, checked it just after midnight. 11 texts and 3 missed calls. The messages followed a predictable arc, confused, first, then worried, then increasingly desperate, landing at last on, Clayton, please. I know you saw us. I know what you must be thinking. Just let me know you're safe. I stared at those words for a long time. She'd seen me leave. She'd understood exactly what I'd witnessed. And she was scared. Not because her husband had vanished into the Denver night, but because she knew what I'd seen and what I was going to do with it. I texted back close to 1 in the morning. I'm safe. I'm at Morris's. I'll come home tomorrow. 3 dots, a long pause. Then I'm so sorry, Clayton. Not, it wasn't what it looked like. Not, you misunderstood. Just, sorry. I set the phone down and lay in the dark in Morris's guest room and held those 3 words up against the light and found them hollow. And I didn't sleep for most of what remained of the night. I got home at 10 the next morning. My wife was at the kitchen table in her robe, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she'd stopped drinking, eyes red and swollen. Hudson came to me at the door and then retreated quietly to his bed in the corner. As if he understood this wasn't his moment. I sat across from her, kept my jacket on. Who is Ronan? I asked. She'd been preparing for this. Her voice stayed steady. He's a consultant. His firm has been working with ours since last fall. We met at a vendor summit in Austin in September. 6 months. And in 6 months, you went from a vendor summit in Austin to whatever I watched on that dance floor. It wasn't planned. She looked at her hands. It started professional. Emails, project calls, then coffees, then lunches. And then we'd talk about things that had nothing to do with work. What things? She looked up. Things I stopped bringing home. Frustrations at work. Places I want to go. Things I want differently. A pause. Things I used to talk to you about, before we both got too tired to really talk. I felt the half-accusation inside that sentence, and chose not to reach for it yet. Has it been physical? No, immediate. No, Clayton. Never. Never yet, I said. She didn't answer that. The silence answered it. I stood up from the table and walked to the window. Our neighbor across the street was raking the last of the winter debris from her yard, working her way methodically from one end of the lawn to the other. A woman, with something simple to do on a Saturday morning. No idea what was collapsing 40 feet away. What does he make you feel? I asked. I want the actual answer. A long silence. Then, interesting, like what I think matters. Like I'm a full person and not just... She stopped. Not just someone's wife. Not just the one who manages things and shows up where she's supposed to show up. I turned around. That is something you should have told me, I said. Not to him, to me. You should have sat across from this table and told me you were disappearing inside this marriage and that something needed to change. You should have been angry out loud. You should have made it impossible for me to miss. I know, her voice cracked. Instead, you went looking for it somewhere else. I know, Clayton. I know. She was crying. I'm not justifying it. I'm trying to explain the path. I understand the path, I said. What I'm trying to figure out is what it means. I packed a bag. She stood in the doorway of our bedroom and watched me fold clothes into the duffel we'd taken to Lisbon, and neither of us said anything. When I lifted it off the bed and carried it toward the door, she asked where I'd go. I said, Morris's probably, or a hotel. I hadn't decided. She asked for how long. I said I didn't know. She asked if I'd tell her when I'd decided something. I said yes. I walked out. I spent 2 nights at Morris's before moving to the Marriott near Union Station. A clean room on the 11th floor where I could look out at the city, without the weight of every corner of our house pressing against me. I worked remotely. I took long walks along Cherry Creek in the evenings when the weather cooperated. I ate takeout and watched television, I can't remember now, and tried to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. which is not a sentence I'd expected to be turning over at 47 in a hotel room on a Wednesday night. On the fourth evening, Morris called. I did some asking around about Ronan, he said. You know Adrienne, who I worked with on the Henderson job. Her wife moves in that consulting world. He paused. Ronan's done this before. 2 other married women, both from client companies. He gets close, builds something that feels real, and then when it starts to have consequences, when things get complicated, he goes quiet. I set down my drink. She was never special to him. Doesn't look like it. No. I sat with that. What I felt wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't even anger at Ronan exactly, though that was there too. Somewhere lower and steadier. What I felt was a particular kind of sadness for my wife, that she had let something real between us go hollow, in exchange for something that was, from his side, most likely habit. I texted her the next morning. Coffee, Thursday, 7 p.m., the place on Marion Street you like. She replied in under a minute. I'll be there. She was already seated when I arrived, hands wrapped around a cup she'd clearly been nursing for a while. She'd made an effort to look put together and hadn't quite managed it. The kind of tired that shows through, regardless of what you put over it. She'd lost weight in the 10 days we'd been apart. Not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. I told her about Ronan's pattern before I sat down with my own coffee. I watched her face as I said it. She didn't look surprised. She looked like someone watching a fear they'd already begun to form, confirm itself quietly. I found out on my own, she said, voice low. After you left, I looked into it. She set her cup down. He texted to me the day after the gala, casual, chatty, like it was any other day. Her jaw tightened slightly. I didn't respond, and 2 days later he stopped reaching out. Just like that. Just like that. A pause, which told me everything I actually needed to know about what I'd meant to him. The cafe moved around us. A couple at the window table. A man working alone on a laptop. The espresso machine running its steady rhythm behind the counter. I miss you, my wife said. Not desperate. Quiet. I don't think I miss him. I think I miss feeling alive inside my own life, and he happened to be standing there. I miss knowing you're the person I come home to. I miss the version of us that actually talks. We let things go quiet, I said. Both of us. She nodded slowly. I'm not saying that to distribute blame. What I did is mine. But somewhere along the way we stopped really talking, and I didn't know how to start again. And instead of figuring that out, I filled the space with something easier. She looked at me directly. That's mine. I own it. I looked at her across that small table. At the woman who'd held my hand through every hard thing in my adult life, who had built something with me, year by year. And who had also, over the past 6 months, been quietly carrying some part of herself away from us towards someone else. I thought about my father, and what he used to say. A good marriage hums. What he never told me was what to do when the hum goes quiet. Whether the silence means it's broken, or whether it means you've both simply stopped listening, and whether, once you've noticed the quiet, you can sit down together and learn to tune back in. I can't make you any promises tonight, I said. I can't tell you trust comes back easily, or that I'm not still carrying what I saw on that dance floor. I'm carrying it. I wrapped both hands around my cup, but I'm not ready to decide that 17 years adds up to nothing. That feels like too fast a conclusion to reach in a hotel room. Something moved across her expression, careful, tentative, like someone who has been holding their breath, allowing themselves a small, cautious exhale. I want to talk to someone, I said. A counselor. Not just each other in our kitchen, structured and honest, in a way we clearly haven't been managing on our own. Yes, she said, whatever it takes, yes. We walked out onto Marion Street into the cool April evening and stood for a moment on the sidewalk without moving. The street was quiet, a few other couples drifting in and out of the restaurant next door. Ordinary people living ordinary Thursday nights. I love you, Clayton, she said. I know that might not mean much right now, but it hasn't stopped being true. I believed her. That was the complicated part of all of it. I believed her, and I still didn't know what came next. I'll call you tomorrow, I said. I walked to my car alone. When I reached the driver's door, I looked back once. She was still standing under the streetlight with her arms crossed against the cold, watching me go. I got in and drove. Somewhere on Spear Boulevard, heading back toward the hotel, I wasn't sure how much longer I needed. I thought about what it actually means to build something meant to last. In engineering, you account for stress. You design for load conditions you can't always predict. You don't assume a structure will hold forever just because it's held so far. You test it, inspect it, go back and reinforce what's weakening before it fails. You pay attention. Maybe that's what we'd both stopped doing. Paying attention. Maybe a marriage isn't so different, not something you build once and walk away from, but something you return to regularly and check the load-bearing parts of and shore up wherever time and inattention have done their quiet damage. I didn't know yet whether what we had was still worth the repair, but I hadn't driven past the point of looking.